Good afternoon, and welcome to Memphis Light Gas and Water's Women in Energy Empowerment Series. I'm your host, Gail Jones Carson, the Vice President of Community and External Affairs. Thank you for joining us for our ninth Women in Energy Empowerment webinar for 2022. The Women in Energy Empowerment Series launched in 2019 as an in-person luncheon for MLGW Women's Management Team. The series is now virtual and features a woman leader in the utility and energy industry who speaks on her tools for success and some of the professional obstacles she has faced during her career. The goal of this series remains the same, and that is to empower, uplift, and to inspire. Our speaker today is Cassandra Wheeler, who serves as a director for Southern Company Supply Chain Management Organization. Cassandra was named to that position in April 2022. Her primary responsibility is for category management for all areas of spend for SCM Generation and Gas. She also leads the demand planning and inventory functions of SCM for Generation and Gas. Cassandra began her career at Alabama Power in 2001 as an engineer at Miller Steam Plant. She also served as the plant's maintenance team leader and operations team. She was selected as the assistant to the executive vice president of the generation for Southern Company in 2003 and as assistant to the vice president of governmental affairs in Washington, D.C. in 2005. In 2006 and 2007, she serves as the operations supervisor and then compliance and supervisor at Plant EC Gaston and was selected as the maintenance and engineering manager at Georgia Plant Yates in 2009. Later in 2009, Cassandra served as the maintenance manager at Plant Miller. In 2012, she was named the plant manager of Gaston Steam Plant, and she served in that role until she became plant manager at Plant Hammer in May 2014. Well, anyway, the rest of her bio is a lot about who Cassandra is, how she's climbed, but I don't really want to tell a whole lot because we want her to talk about herself. But she is a graduate of the University of Cincinnati with a Bachelor's of Science degree in Electrical Engineering and a graduate of the University of Alabama at Birmingham with a Master's of Business Administration degree. So Cassandra, thank you for being here with us and talking with us and sharing your life with us and your experiences today.
Thank you for having me. So you read my bio. You all have heard who I am. How I got here to Southern Company was a high school friend, was leaving a position at Plant Miller in Alabama Power. And he called me up, he said, I hate this job. He was very much an introvert, didn't like having to deal with people. But as you know, if you're going to get along and advance, you have to deal with people in an industrial environment or a corporate environment. He said, I don't like this job. I think you would love it and they would love you. And 3 months later, I was sitting in his chair. He had moved on to something else. So that's kind of how I got here. My journey to where I am today is not what I expected. If you had asked me 21 years ago, which is when I joined the company, if I would be a director in supply chain, I would say probably not. You know, it's not. Or external affairs. I spent 4.5 years in external affairs, and I never would have imagined myself there. I spent most of my career in operations. I enjoyed it very much. I became a plant manager, first African-American female plant manager for the entire company in 2012, the first time so in Alabama, and then again in 2014 in Georgia. And it's a distinction that I wear proudly, and of course felt like there was a lot of responsibility that came with that. But in 2000, probably 15 timeframe, I had a conversation with the then senior vice president of customer service, who said to me that, it's important for you to know that for all that you're doing, people are watching. And I'm thinking, because I'm in a power plant and basically a rural environment, rural area of the state, nobody's paying attention. I'm just doing my thing. And he wanted to put me on a succession plan for the role that later became for me, regional director for the Northwest region. And I served in that role for 4.5 years. And then in May, became the director for supply chain management, category management. So some of the challenges, I guess, the obstacles that I faced initially, coming from Cincinnati, the Cincinnati area, Ohio area, back to the South, because I had been in the Air Force right after high school, which is not the path that any of my friends had taken. All of us, we graduated in the top 10 of our class. But I'm an only child, and I wanted the opportunity to mature, to grow up, if you will, without my mother determining how that would happen necessarily. And so I joined the Air Force, spent 6 years, a little over 6 years in the Air Force. And when I was ready to separate, got a scholarship to the University of Cincinnati and then became an engineer. When I joined the Southern Company at Alabama Power in a power plant, I had no idea what that experience would be like. I knew that I didn't see a lot of people who looked like me, but as fate would have it, my manager at the time, not the person who hired me, but by the time I joined the company, the person who would be my manager was female. And after hearing her story, I was inspired. If she can do it, I can do it too, right?
All right.
So that is really what helped. And she became a mentor as well. And so that's really what helped me on my career path. As far as obstacles go, you're challenged by having people think that you're in a role because you're a female or you're a minority, not that you earn, your stripes. And I had to defend that from time to time. And it showed me the value of showing up prepared for your work. And so there were challenges at times. When people tell me, as a woman in a male-dominated industry, that they've not had any challenges or they didn't have any negative experiences, I'm suspicious of what
I'm suspect, Cassandra.
Yeah.
I am very suspect, unless they're the owner's daughter.
Exactly. That's exactly right. Because that happens to you all the time. And as I grew, I remember when I became plant manager the second time, there was a note placed on my door. And it was not necessarily a physical threat, but it was a threat.
And, oh my God.
Yeah, in front of the entire plant at a safety meeting, I read the note to everyone at the plant. And I explained to them. Bold. Yeah, I explained to them who I am and who my grandmother raised. And I will not be intimidated by anybody. And if whoever wrote the note wanted to talk about it, we could talk about it. And I left that note under the glass on my desk the entire time I was there. That person never came forward, and it was okay. But it's that kind of thing that you face, especially in a rural environment like Rome, Georgia. So great experience living with my family. My daughter, and I didn't talk about my family. I have a daughter who is 5, and then I have a stepdaughter who is 20. She just turned 23. She's at Howard University. But we felt very safe in Rome. With her growing up, there are things that I do in Rome that I probably wouldn't do in Atlanta in terms of, how we enter and exit a car, for instance, something that simple. So we feel safe in Rome, but now we're moving to Atlanta. So that's a whole nother story for a different day.
Did you say Atlanta or Atlantic?
Atlanta.
Oh, Atlanta, okay.
Atlanta, closer to Atlanta. We won't live in Atlanta proper, I'm sure, probably the outskirts, but we're moving closer to Atlanta because of this role that I'm in now. In terms of this career path, in our company, you are groomed for leadership, if you will, but it takes your leader, wherever you are, in whatever position you're in, to identify you as someone who can become a leader for you to be developed into that. So,
well, let me ask you this. So do you know Bettina Hunt?
No, Bettina Hunt?
Bettina, yes, she's an executive, I think maybe at Southern, and she does a lot of leadership development and mentoring.
Okay, I know Bettina Terry, but I don't know Bettina.
I'm sorry, I don't mean Bettina Hunt. I'm sorry, it's Bettina Terry.
Right. Oh, yes, I worked for Bettina. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So she's, I mean, I've heard nothing. Well, she's been one of our speakers. Okay. And I've heard nothing but fabulous things about her and how she pulls people up with her. And that is, for me, a sign of strong leadership and mentorship when you can look back and see how many people have I pulled up? How many people have I pulled with me?
That's exactly right. Yeah, Bettina, it was my first manager outside of operations. So when I joined external affairs, she was my VP.
Okay, great.
And so great experience in an awesome team. And you're absolutely right. I don't believe that you can lead properly unless you responsibly help others. You know,
exactly.
What we do as leaders, a big part of it is developing the careers of others. And I've been very fortunate to work with managers who've been really diligent about helping me move forward to the next thing. So I'm grateful for that. So I didn't ask to be in any role that I've ever had except one. And the one role that I made a phone call about was the assistant to the first executive vice president that I worked for. And even in that, I wasn't sure what it was completely, but I understood that that role would help me to have a broader perspective of the company, a better understanding, and then also give me an opportunity to work with some of our executive level management. So as it turns out, I ended up doing it once for all of Southern Company. He was the chief production officer for all of the power plants within Southern Company. And then later I did it a second time for our vice president in governmental affairs in Washington, DC. Phenomenal opportunities. And in this role, I transitioned out of external affairs into this role because of the skill set that I have. Our senior vice president now is a former plant manager. He and I have worked together and is just trying to organize the supply chain management organization such that we are valued for what we do for the company, but also have the responsibility of economic inclusion. And so that's how I got here in this role.
So let me ask you this question before you move on. So you have an undergraduate degree in engineering and you have an MBA. So do you think that has helped you in your varied roles in your career? Because you've done a number of different kinds of work.
Mm-hmm. I do. So as an engineer, our main job is to solve problems, be it something mechanical or electrical. And as an electrical engineer, my first frontline management position was as an electrical team leader. And so being able to solve problems and build the skill set of dealing with people to resolve issues is what I've done. And I think many people do growing in their career. Then with my MBA, just understanding some of the importance of the financials and all of the behind the scenes things that happen with a company. That is what my MBA has helped me with, in addition to organizational skills and people skills, just having the opportunity to manage people the way that I do.
Okay, so Bettina, I got this question. Okay, so you got your undergraduate degree in electrical engineering. And so you just can't wake up one day and major in electrical engineering. So when you were that little girl growing up, did you know where you were headed or what you wanted to be?
So I knew when I was in the 10th grade that I wanted to be a pharmacist.
Oh,
That's what I wanted to do. And I graduated from high school thinking, in fact, I read it in my little memory book the other day that I was going to be a pharmacist. And I was headed to Dillard, I thought. And my mother said, you are not going to Dillard. It was expensive and we didn't have any Dillard money necessarily. And so I decided, well, I'll just go to the military and we'll figure it out. While in the military, I met a team of folks who would come and service our testing equipment. I was a B-1 bomber avionics test technician.
Wow.
And so they would come, these are really big test machines, and they would come and service the equipment. Well, while I was in the Air Force, I also took classes at the local university, and I was doing homework and they said, what are you doing? And so I tell them what I'm doing. Well, what are you going to school for? I want to be a pharmacist because I was majoring in chemistry at the time. And they said, why? What you're doing is engineering. Think about it. And so we had long conversations about it. And these guys just took an interest in me, didn't have to. In that shop, there were 43 people. 3 of us were female and 2 of us were African-American. And those guys didn't look anything like me. And they had great advice for me. And so one of the pieces of advice that I understood is that the folks who can help you the most don't always necessarily show up like you. And it's very important to have allies outside of what your normal circle would be. Like that's important. So that's how
you said something earlier too about people watching you and you didn't know that they were watching you. None of us ever know who's watching us and who's impressed or not impressed with how we do things, how we work with other people.
That's exactly right. You know, and you don't do what you do because people are watching. You do what you do to be excellent and to be a better service to yourself and to others. For me, my faith is very important to me, and I really try to present the way that I would have someone present to me and to mentor me and to help me along the way. A lot of people have, and I'm grateful for that, indebted to a lot of people. And I feel like it's my responsibility to pay it forward and pull, to your point, pull some people along. I've been very grateful to have mentored more people than I can count. Let's just say that. And
so let me ask you this, Cassandra, women, you know, there are some women who don't like working for women. What are your thoughts on that?
So that's I was thinking about today, and I remember back in 2005, there was one female plant manager. And I said to her, I said, because we were having some kind of women's group type meeting, I said, why do you think it is that women don't help women? Because statistically, we just don't. And she said, I believe it is because there are very few positions at the top for us.
Exactly.
And people aren't going to help you get what they think is their position. That's what happens.
But you know, that's also the same attitude for some African Americans.
Oh, yes.
They feel that there are only a few at the top that will get, that they can get. So they're competitive with one another.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree with that. And so for me, I've been very intentional about how I show up and being fair to everyone, being the person I would want to see as my manager. I have questioned since I became a parent, how difficult it would have been working for me as a non-parent, because sometimes you make these decisions and tell people to do these things when you haven't walked in their shoes.
Exactly.
So, as a female manager, being sure that I'll show up the kind of person that I want to be as a manager.
Well, and I'm glad you kind of mentioned, I'm glad you mentioned that, because being a parent, I was divorced. When I got a divorce, my oldest son was 3, my youngest son was 18 months. But I showed up, I worked hard. I even had to travel a lot. I was working at Federal Express at the time. And I couldn't have any excuses, because if I had excuses, Federal Express had other people to replace me. So I try to make sure females know that even though you have small families, you still can and you must show up. You must prove your worth. You must continue to work hard because you represent other females. And if you have daughters and granddaughters, they must see you do this. They must see you be successful.
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. I was saying to my husband last night, because this week I have been to Chicago and Birmingham, and it's just Thursday. And so that happens, and I do it so that my daughter can see that it can be done, and I can still be a good mom. I think when other women don't support, which I've had a female say to me before, what would you have done with Mila? My daughter's name is Mila. With Mila, had you gotten that job? Well, I would work it out. That's not anybody's decision to make. That's my decision. And I work very hard to be a good mom and to show up as a strong employee, a leader for the people that I work with.
And you know what, Cassandra, I have listened to men over the years who they can't publicly really say that sometimes they will discriminate against women who have small children because they think they won't show up. They think they're going to be out of work a lot. They have a lot of excuses. I've had arguments with folks. So you got an employee who fits the mold that you have, but all women employees with children and families are not like that.
That's right.
So that's another reason that we have to show up. We must be great in all that we do.
Well, and I tell people, in fact, I was with some folks on Tuesday and explaining that I wouldn't be in a meeting on the 13th because my little girl has a field trip and I really need to be with her for that field trip. I try to be, again, the example I want to see. And it's okay for us as leaders to show both sides of it. You can be a strong leader and still be a good parent. Someone asked me today, can you have it all? You can, just not at the same time.
We can, and we do.
Yeah.
We can and we do.
You can have it.
We
just
do
not,
it all.
not always at the same time. So yes, there's a lot of responsibility that comes with being a leader. And I really try as a female leader to be fair to everyone, but intentionally not be the female leader that people hate.
Oh, okay, so touching on that, have you mentored and helped any females who have basically like stabbed you in the back?
So I wouldn't say they stabbed me in the back, Gail. That hasn't been my experience, but it has been my experience that with who presents as a friend is sometimes a friend of me. Like they're not doing anything to physically harm you. They're just not doing anything to help you or career-wise, not even physically, but they're not trying to harm you, but they're not trying to help you either. Not trying to figure out a solution to make the answer yes. That has been the case. Not a whole lot, but that has been the case, unfortunately.
Yeah. Well, it's sad that a lot of us are very supportive of each other, but you have a lot of us who are not. So have you found male or female mentors more beneficial, more supportive?
So when I think about my career and the people who have influenced it the most over the last 21 years, mostly male. And it's not because I've done anything inappropriate. I stand firm on my Christian values. I don't have inappropriate relationships with anyone. I just think that it became easier, maybe.
But could it also have been because you work mostly with males as well?
Yeah, that's a big part. I mean, it's the utility industry, so that's a big part of it as well. And I when I look at other leaders, female leaders, I think they would say the same thing within our company. I think that is probably the case.
Well, and you touched on a minute ago, you didn't do anything inappropriate. I have found that there are women who do things that are considered possibly inappropriate, that the woman ends up being the one who suffers. Her career is the one that's hurt the most. And it also leaves a negative image for other women who are trying to climb as they work really hard to get where they're going.
Yeah, that's exactly right. What happens is that all of these people, not just women,
Yeah, it's not,
people
yeah,
are
it's not just
watching.
women. Yeah.
Men, I've been in meetings or had meetings set up whereby man won't, number one, let you as a female ride in the car with him. They won't go to dinner, sit down by themselves with you because of how it appears as a married leader. And it is because of the inappropriateness of some of the relationships. And so I'm very careful to, and I don't necessarily think that's fair because I am who I am. And if you're giving my male counterpart an opportunity to meet with you and to build that relationship, I too should have that opportunity. It's
Exactly.
unfair for me to not have it. And so, but I've been very careful to not even let it appear that I'm doing anything inappropriate. That because I don't want to be that person.
And nor do you want the reputation that you got where you
Exactly.
were because of that.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I can walk in any room, any boardroom, anywhere in this company, knowing that I've not done anything inappropriate.
And
And
I
that,
just think that that's a strong message that should be sent to
Mhm.
all women, no matter what jobs they're in.
Well, yeah, I mean, we're very smart individuals. Women add so much value to a team, always a different perspective. There's so much that we contribute to any team that we're on because our perspective is different. How we all think is different, especially in the utility industry. I remember being in a meeting one time, a plant managers meeting, and we were discussing development, career development for a particular group of ladies in a plant. And the discussion came up about this one particular female, and her plant manager said, "Oh, we don't need to consider her because she's in a relationship right now, and so she's not going to want to move." And I was
Oh,
like, "I'm throwing
wow.
the HR flag on that. That is not your decision to make. She
Exactly.
gets it. We shouldn't even be having this conversation. That's inappropriate.
Yes.
Whether or not if she's prepared for it, then she needs a shot, So,
Mhm.
and that's one of the things that we have to do. There are so many times that we show up as the minority in the room, right? It can be as a female, it can be as African American. And we sit idly by sometimes, I've seen it. We sit idly by allowing this negative conversation to go on when
Exactly.
you really have the responsibility to speak up and to say something in defense of the person who doesn't have a seat at the table. And so, I've gotten in trouble sometimes. There were days in one role that I was in.
Sounds like me, Cassandra.
Yeah, I walked out thanking God every day for my job. Like, Lord, I'm just glad I kept my job today. And I've never been afraid to challenge and challenge respectfully, but definitely to challenge. I remember, those assessments, those personality assessments that you get all the time. And I remember being evaluated earlier in my career, and it said that I was an introvert. I was an introvert, but also being evaluated by my peers, I was intimidating. So I was an intimidating introvert, if you can be that. And I just did another assessment a couple of weeks ago for my current VP, and I'm social and not intimidating. A driver is what I am. So what has happened to me as I've evolved over the past 21 years is that I've come out of my shell because it was necessary for me to do, not just for me and my career development, but that of others. And so I'm not an introvert anymore as it concerns work, because I am still very much an introvert. Don't get it twisted. But I also understand the value of socializing. And I share that because sometimes we need to be our authentic selves, but you also need to understand the responsibility that comes with trying to get to where you're going or being who you are. As a leader, you can't afford to be an introvert. Those people that you lead, they depend on you to speak up when they're present, to help them, and when they're not present, to also help them. It
And
makes
you
a
know,
difference.
Cassandra, as you say that, I tell people all the time. Sometimes, I used to work for a mayor, and he said one time, Gail, sometimes people, they're at the table, they don't even know what to do when they get at the table.
Yeah.
So I always suggest to people that I say, if you're at the table and you don't say anything, sometimes people think you don't have anything in your head. But if you're at the table, you must speak up. And you also mentioned earlier that you challenge respectfully. So as you speak, some people are very concerned with how you speak. And so how have you dealt with, because you said you challenge respectfully.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean your tone, how you say something, or what you say when you challenge respectfully?
So every person is different, right? Every manager that I've had has been different. And the last plant manager for whom I worked hired me because he wanted to be challenged. I had worked for him as a young engineer.
Oh, to hear that's good, because some folks don't want to be challenged. They want they want you to agree with everything they say.
Well, and that's what the team always did with him, right? And so
but they can't learn anything.
Right.
If there's a problem, if they see a hole coming, they don't tell you to take a right or a left. They let you walk in the hole.
Oh, and I saw it all the time. So, but that's not my personality. And so I would, if he would say, isn't the sky green today? Everybody shake their head. Yep, it looks green to me. And I'd be like, that sky is not green. It is blue. Why would you say it's green? And until he became frustrated with me challenging him and called me into his office. And he said, listen, it's not that you're challenging me. You just don't need to do it in front of everybody else. Like, listen, tell me that. Tell me what you need, because I can do whatever you want me to do, but I have a hard time making people believe something that is not true. That's difficult for me. And it all worked out because he's the one who had me promoted to a plant manager. But it was tough. Good. It was tough. I mean, I earned. But
see, he still had a great level of respect for you.
He did. I mean, he appreciated it, and he's retired, and to this day we stay in touch. He appreciated it, whereby people, when people see the leader acting a certain way, they jump on the bandwagon and they start treating you that way. Like they think that he doesn't like her, and so they're going to start treating you like, I don't like you either, because I'm on side with the manager, so the plant manager, so I can, get what I need.
Junior high school behavior.
Yes. Oh yeah, and it happened, and really, he and I were very good friends, in the end. But I learned a lot working for him. I did, and so challenging respectfully for him meant when I said it. It's always how you say it, and definitely what you say. I've learned to challenge by asking a question, not just telling people that something is wrong or I think it should be a certain way, but always put it in the form of a question, even when I know the answer.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Even at my age, I've still learned something every day.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important to not, especially as a female, react to everything. I recently had a person who worked at my last power plant tell me, he said, one of the things that I remember about you is that even when things got really bad, when something really bad happened, like a forced outage, you never raised your voice. Like you never got upset. I was like, oh no, I got upset. I was like, but you're right. Reacting to it is not going to get anything done. I worked for that before. I've seen that before, and I don't like that style. I think that you definitely get better results in the results that you need by understanding what people are dealing with. And sometimes, they got so much going on, they probably shouldn't be at work. So you just take the time to be patient to understand what really happened before you fly off the handle about something that, was probably a mistake or an error.
So what are you passionate about? What is it you're passionate about in your
about
career?
Developing people. I am. I'm passionate about having an impact on people's careers and their lives and making a difference. So many times we sit idly by knowing that, you know, people need a chance, that they're not somebody you need to sit on a shelf and forget that they're there. They may have messed up once in their career, and we have these long memories and won't give people a second chance. People need a second chance, you know? You figure out what it is that's broken, try to help them fix it. And if they want to grow, figure out how to get them there. We too often throw the baby out with the bathwater and just forget about these folks. And we're letting good talent slip out of the door because of one mistake. I'm passionate about and intentional about helping people grow their careers and realizing dreams, because that type of leadership changes lives. Like, you have the potential to change a person's life for generations when you figure out what's going on with them and how you can help them. So I'm very passionate about helping people and then solving problems, you know, in an environment. You know, whenever job that I've come into, if there's been an issue to identify and tackle, I want to get about the business of figuring that out and fix it.
So I'm glad to hear that your passion leads you to focus on development. So during this pandemic, this last 2.5 years, a lot of people have left their jobs, and many have left, you know, for various reasons, for income, for a number of reasons. But one of the things I remember reading is that a lot of people leave their job. It was like 90-something% because they have bad managers.
That's exactly right.
And also with this job popping, one of the things that some of the HR people are doing in different industries is focusing on career development. How can they help these people learn and grow in the areas in which they're interested in? That's just one of the nuggets that they're throwing out there to help people to grow. And so if employees see, well, there's an opportunity for me to continue to grow and to move up and have people like you to work with them, they tend not to job hop as often or frequently.
That's right. I believe people leave managers. They don't leave the company.
And that is what I have read.
Yeah, they leave the manager. You know, my husband and I both work for the same company, and he often tells me that he sees the company through my eyes, because through his eyes, it hasn't been a good experience for him oftentimes. And it's just two sides to this story, right? And it's a lot of it has to do with his management, because this is a great company. Southern Company is a great company, and we too have had what I would call a mass exodus, and people leave for a variety of reasons. But more often than not, it's because of the leadership.
So yeah, so the people, you say you've had a mass exodus. So you think it more is because of the leadership, or more money, career change?
I think it's all of that. So as you've seen people leave top positions at companies all across America, probably the world, those are vacancies that somebody has to fill. And
I see it as somebody else's opportunity.
That's right. That's exactly right. And so when those positions become available and you spent your career preparing for something like that, and then they make you an offer that you can't refuse, that's when you leave. I mean, it happens all the time.
So I'm going to check to see if we have any. Do we have any questions, Lillian? I do have one person who has said great advice.
Okay. So
I don't see any questions.
Okay.
I did have, so one of the things that you all gave me some information that helped me to be prepared for today. Something that I wish that I knew before starting in my career or in this position or any position for that matter. Something that I wish I knew is to speak up, you know, that you don't have to be perfect, and you don't need to remain silent, right? sometimes people are afraid to speak, which is, to your point, dangerous because nobody hears your voice. You're afraid to speak because you think you're going to get it wrong. But even if you get it wrong, it's okay to get it wrong. You don't have to show up perfect all the time. People spend their lives growing their careers and oftentimes thinking that they have to check every single box to get to the next thing. Whereas some people are developing relationships that allows the manager or the folks who sit at the table to make a decision based on the skill set that they believe the person has developed, right? So that person didn't necessarily check all those boxes. They made an impression on the right person at the right time. And a lot of that has to do with using your voice. And so I don't think that I understood that very early on in my career. And because I am an introvert, I know that in the early years, I didn't always contribute to the conversation. You know, my biggest regret is one time having an argument with a peer. He was a much older team leader, but he frequently would publicly bash my team as if they were showing up and not doing what they were supposed to do. And these are people who grew up with him, if you will, in the company. But every opportunity he got in this particular meeting, he would say something negative about somebody on the team or them not completing the job. And I had just gotten tired of it one day. I had had enough. And that particular day, the person who had been really quiet most of the time, at that time in my career, I got into a verbal confrontation with this man. It was bad.
So
And
did you pray when you left that meeting like you say you did?
no, so then I was too angry. I was young. And so I was just like, say something else. That's how I was, say something else. And so, so as I look back over that, I just remember thinking, you know, I'm better than this. I am better than this, but I learned from it.
Yeah.
Because that's not the person I show up to be. And I didn't want people to view me that way. It's never happened again. It never happened again. I did it for the right reason, to protect my team. It wasn't about me, it was about them. But there, I could have handled it differently. So for as much as I think you need to sit at the table, you need to use your voice, and knowing that you don't have to get it right all of the time, you also don't need to go in the other direction and speak up too much.
Did you have to recover from that? How, if you did, how did you recover from
I did, because he was very difficult and everybody knew it.
Oh, okay.
And some people were saying it's about time somebody said something, you know, but I didn't have to be that person because again, I'm the young person in the room.
Well, do you think that his attack on your team had anything to do with you?
I think it was more about his personality,
Okay.
because he would do it to a lot of people.
Oh,
he was just a mean guy. He was somebody who should have retired like probably 5 years prior, just because he couldn't handle. I don't think he could handle at that point in his life the pressure at that particular plant. It was very busy, and so it was a lot going on, and he was not nice to anybody. He really wasn't. It was him more so than me.
okay. So let me ask you this: how have you all pivoted, or how have you dealt with work and your team during the pandemic?
Yeah, so I have had 2 different teams during the pandemic. So I worked in one role, and it was external affairs. And in external affairs, you have to engage with the public. And that was very difficult for us. But staying in touch with the leadership in our various communities and plug it in the way that we needed to plug in when we could is how we thrived and survived. In terms of developing people, it's the thing that I worry about the most for people. I think it can be done. I just think there's value in seeing an employee in action and having that face-to-face interaction with them to really get a good feel for their presence, their executive presence, how they lead. The conversation is different when it's in person versus virtual. And you show up polished in a different way, because you can do it virtually, but it's different in person. So it's been difficult.
Well, and everything pretty much I read is those who show up are more likely to be the ones who get promoted as well. I mean, whether it's fair or not, that's just what, that's what the data is showing.
That's right. Well, and we're returning to the office slowly, but we're returning to the office. And so I think that'll make a difference. But my desire, especially for young people who have gotten, or anybody who've gotten into this mode of, I just want to work out. I want this flexibility to be able to do what I want to do on Mondays and Fridays. I might show up Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday kind of thing. Now you got to show up. 40 hours is what's required, at least. So
if mine don't show up, I just start hiring contractors. I just say people got to do what's best for them and their families. I understand.
Yeah.
I understand. So I do have a question. What advice do you have for those who are struggling to use their voice, to speak up, I guess?
Yeah, I think that what I would suggest that person do is to seek out someone in the room who they believe would be willing to mentor them, to have that person offer feedback on what you could have said or how you can begin to be introduced into the conversation, how you can start to participate. Because when you struggle with that, you don't know when to jump in, like what makes sense. You don't want to speak just to be heard, just so somebody can see that you are in the room. You want to add value to the conversation. And oftentimes, especially as an introvert, you have a lot to offer. You're just not sure what to say and when to say it. And having someone in the room to kind of help coach you along the way is important. A good mentor is also very important. But at some point, internally, you have to determine within yourself that you're going to take the time to jump out there to do it. And just jump. I mean, the worst thing that can happen is that you say the wrong thing and somebody calls you on and you say, oh yeah, that wasn't correct. You're right. And get better, but you have to start somewhere.
Okay, so the next question is, what signs can leaders look for to self-check that they may need to reevaluate their leadership style?
How their employees or their team members are interacting with them, or the lack thereof. If they're not, so one of the things that I always say in any job that I've ever had is that you got to have moles and birds. You got to have those people who are behind the scenes. They know what's going on, and they will tell you. Trust them to tell you the real truth, not the stuff that your directs might tell you. They're not going to tell you everything. Your directs won't, but those moles and birds who they're back there and people don't know that you got them as moles and birds. Those are the people I rely on to tell me. In fact, just got off the phone with one to tell me, like, what are you hearing? Like, help me to see what other people are seeing. Is there negative feedback that you're getting about me or my team's leadership? Tell me what you're seeing. So just having people who will tell you your truth and knowing where to find those people is how you survive as a leader. That's what I believe.
And Cassandra, one of the things that I do, maybe once every year, every other year, is I meet with every employee. I don't care what their job title is, individually. They come to my office, or during Zoom, we had Zoom meetings. They know what they say to me is left with me. But I have learned so much about about my employees individually, as well as their work areas, what's going on in the department, and what's going on in the company. I find out if they're unhappy. I tell people all the time, you don't have to be happy every day on the job, but you don't need to be unhappy too much on the job. So I try to do that to find out just what you were saying too. So one year I was getting very high evaluations, employee evaluation. One year, my score was low, and I was like, "Oh Lord, what's going on?" And so, and it's the way they roll the numbers up here on the evaluation. So you can't really tell where the problem area is by looking at the score. So I had them do another assessment. And so I met with people individually, and I found out one of my areas, it was like almost like one of those, not like a crock pot, but the pot, the thing was the top was about to blow off. It was so much mess going on. But I only found that out by meeting with employees individually and talking to management about the problem and letting them know, you need to address this. You need to get this right. You don't, like you said, they don't tell their bosses, but they tell other people. And so that's another way that people can learn about their leadership and the leadership team that they have, is by talking to your employees.
I agree. No, I would always pride myself on two things as a plant manager. Even when I was a department manager in a plant, I wanted to know every person in my department, and then later my plant, the name of every person. And I wanted to be able to know something about their family. And I learned it from a previous plant manager. And the other thing that I would always ask, what do I need to start, stop, and continue? I ask that all the time. I ask it of my directs. I'll ask it to people that I am just talking to who come from, the workforce, the rest of the plant or the team further down than my directs, because they're seeing things and their perspective will likely be a little bit different from what my directs will offer. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Staying engaged with the entire team makes a difference.
So do any of them get intimidated because of your title?
I think that was the case in the past, and in fact, I know when I went back to the plant that I started at, people were very concerned because now I'm not the engineer, I'm the maintenance manager in that role. And they didn't know what to expect. And a lot of it was my military background too. They were thinking, I'm gonna come in, rule with an iron fist. And you have to spend the time, invest the time in allowing people to get to know you for who you are. And I would do a lot of relationship building and listening to their concerns. And at that time, there were a lot of concerns, and trying to work through it. And they may not always get the result that they're aiming for, but at least I listened. And I would always bake cookies. I baked cookies for the entire plant when I was a plant manager.
Oh my God, you did them yourself?
Yes, all my stuff, because I enjoy baking. And it's my husband's favorite time of the year. He's like, I love this time of year. So I would bake cookies for the entire plant. And I would always bake cookies for my entire team. Because I think that it's important for people to be able to relate to you in that way. It makes you more human, if you will.
Okay, let me see if there are any other questions.
Hey, Cassandra, I unmuted myself. I'm just telling you, I'm sitting here listening to you, and you have a lot of, you've spoken a lot of words. I'm glad at me, Gail. My mom is even here listening to you right now. She back here clapping her hands. So I think that's probably something else in life. But you're providing a lot of good information. I just wanted to
thank you.
That cannot just be applied professionally, just all around in our whole lives. So I just wanted to say that.
Well, thank you.
So thank you for that, Angelica. And as we wind down, Cassandra, what kind of tips and nuggets do you want to leave, not just this audience, but as we put this show on YouTube for the world to see, what nuggets do you have for people in the workforce, women in the workforce, as they want to continue to grow in their development and in, up the corporate ladder?
Understand the value of relationships, up, down, and across. Manage your calendar and don't let your calendar manage you. What happens a lot of times is that you get so caught up in, all of the stuff you have to do, and you lose yourself in it. It's important to always be able to tap into yourself and spend some time, even if it's just downtime, reading a book, doing nothing, sitting in a chair somewhere doing nothing. That time needs to be taken and it can only be done if you manage your calendar. Be sure to sit at the table and use your voice, even when you don't think they're listening, they are. Participate because it matters, and they need to see that you add value to a team, and nobody knows that if you're not speaking your truth. Control your emotions. And I'm not saying that you can't get angry or you can't cry, but I don't advise it. You know, I've never been one to cry at work. I don't cry like, you know, but I've not been one to cry at work. I just, or to get so angry that I lose control, with the exception of that one time. And it taught me a lesson about myself and managing my emotions. And then prepare to be excellent. You can't be a great leader without preparation. And preparing means that you know about the job, you understand what the results need to be, you understand the challenges, and you're trying to work with leadership to get the results that you need. So you have to do your homework. You can't just show up cute. You know, that's not enough. That's not enough. It helps, but it's not enough. You definitely need to do the work. Do the work so that when you get to wherever you're going, you know that you deserved it. You earned it. You earned
Exactly. It. And also, as you mentioned earlier, you can be excellent. You can be a mother, and we can do all of that and still have balance in our life, and we can have it all, but we got to be balanced so we won't be stressed out, and we can be great at work and great with our families.
Yes, that's absolutely right. You know, I was saying to someone today as we close, you know, my little girl is 5 years old. Mila is the air that I breathe. She really is. Mm-hmm. And she said to me one day, "Mommy, let me hear you laugh." What? And what that said to me was that I hadn't laughed in her presence in a while because I just got so busy doing the work. It's important that we take time for the things that matter, and it cannot be work-centered. Your family matters.
Family matters.
Feel it all the time.
And as I have gotten older, I have granddaughters, and I want to be with them as much as I can, as often as I can. They don't live here. They pretty much live in Atlanta. One of them is at LSU. So my work is extremely important. I do work when I'm with them, but I also enjoy every moment that I'm with them. At my age, I just can't miss those precious moments.
That's right.
With your children and your grandchildren and other people who you love. And so, Cassandra, I just want to say you have been very amazing today. You've provided, shared a wonderful story, a lot of good advice, and we appreciate you taking this time to come out with us. So thanks to everybody who's watching with us today. Cassandra Wheeler is the director for Southern Company Supply Chain Management Organization. So we'll see you next time. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for having me. You all take care. Thank you.
All righty. We're out.